Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Edson Barbosa to defeat Tony Ferguson. And I'm here to preview UFC on ABC 6 or UFC Fight Night Saudi Arabia or UFC Fight Night Whittaker versus Aliskerov. Whatever. I've already lost my steam here. Think I'm just going to bed. Fuck it. All right, MMA Al Dentites. I am here to talk about the main card of UFC Saudi Arabia, and I'm going to start with the main event, which is Ikram Aliskerov stepping up on very short notice to replace a former foe of his, Khamzat Chimaev, to take on Robert Whittaker. This is just the polar opposite of the fight he had booked last week, which he had one foot in the octagon door before the fight got canceled. But he was a 10-1, I think it was like 13-1 favorite against Antonio Tricoli. And now he has skipped levels D, C, and B. And he has gone right to level A. And he's fighting Robert Whittaker as a plus 125 underdog, which is still incredibly respectful of Ikram Aliskerov's skills. Because Robert Whittaker is a former champion and all the rest of it, but still today he's one of the best middleweights in the world, top 5 and whatever else. So this is an incredible opportunity for Aliskerov. You know, it's not like there's nothing to be gained. He can gain a lot from this, a title shot and all the rest, especially doing it under these circumstances. But this is a pretty tall order in beating Robert Whittaker. And I am going with Robert Whittaker. I'm picking Robert Whittaker, but even at tight odds, he's a 3-2 favorite. I'm not betting on Robert Whittaker. I'm probably not betting on this fight altogether. And I love to bet on the main event. But this is just one where I have a lot of respect for Ikram Aliskerov's skills, and I'm starting to have a little bit of doubt about Robert Whittaker as of late. Whittaker is a guy who has only been beaten twice at middleweight against Israel Adesanya, 3 times. He was beaten twice by Israel Adesanya and once by Dricus du Plessis in world title fights. Actually, not the Dricus du Plessis fight, but close enough. And that was the type of fight that this one is, where if Ikram Aliskerov is able to go through Whittaker in a way that Dricus du Plessis did, Ikram Aliskerov could be fighting for a title. Although Strickland and this one, everyone's got their say. So, it depends on the situation in the division. And maybe right now that wouldn't produce a title shot. But beating Robert Whittaker definitely puts you in the realm where if there's a clear path, you're fighting for a title because Whittaker is a championship level fighter. And that's that's the basis for my pick. The fact that there are levels and Whittaker's a championship level fighter. Whittaker, he's got plenty of experience, 5-round and 3-round, but here especially 5-round experience. And of course, he's the guy who was training for 5 rounds. And again, having only been beaten by the very best, the last 2 of the last 3 champions in the middleweight division, and having beaten every other one of the contenders, just about every one of them. He's beaten them by decision, but still. He figured out a way to tame all those guys in 3 rounds or 5. And here I think, as long as he hasn't completely fallen off a cliff and Ikram Aliskerov doesn't touch that chin, I think Whittaker would win the fight, the points battle. Even if Ikram Aliskerov is able to take him down, which Whittaker, wrestling is his base first and foremost. Even if it doesn't look like it, I'm thinking Whittaker, even if he's taken down and whatever, if he doesn't get finished, he's going to be keeping himself upright for the majority of the fight, especially later on. But Whittaker, he's been through so many wars where, again, I'm just waiting to have a lot of doubt in him. You can go back and watch those Yoel Romero fights, and I was just waiting for him to fall off a cliff since then. He still hasn't, even though he's been finished twice in the last 5 years or whatever. Once by Izzy and Tadrikas 2 years ago or whatever. But those are 2 of the very best, and Whittaker is still fighting the very best. And against Paulo Costa, he was hurt. The spinning wheel kick caught him, but he tamed Paulo Costa. which after the way Strickland did it and really froze him, maybe it's not so impressive. But Costa is a very good fighter. Even if he hasn't looked like it as of late, he's a very good fighter, and Robert Whittaker was able to thwart him. And I think that's what will happen against Ikram Aliskerov. The fight I'm envisioning is a tough fight early for Whittaker, on the feet and on the ground if it goes there, regardless of who takes it there. But in the end, I see Whittaker controlling the distance and landing the better strikes and really taming Aliskerov. And if it should come down to it, I think the ultimate difference maker would be one guy's a 5 round fighter who's been prepped for a 5 round fight, and the other guy isn't. But Ikram Aliskerov, I have all the faith in this guy. That's enough faith to not bet on Whittaker. But I still think, I think Aliskerov's a very good fighter. When he came to the UFC, I said this guy is going to beat some top fighters. It's just that this is such a big leap in competition and under such shitty circumstances. Although again, he's got a full camp behind him, so maybe it's not the shittiest. But I still think this is just a little too much for me to pick him to win this one. But I think he can beat a lot of top fighters, and I think he's going to give Whittaker a hell of a shot. Ikram's proven to be dangerous, very dangerous. Knocked out Worley Alves, which, by the way, this guy loves knees. I mean, if you fight him long enough, if he doesn't just take you down and rip your arm off or something, he's going to be throwing flying knees. That's one of his things. So Whittaker, with having been rocked a few times and finished a few times lately, he's got to watch out for that. But Ikram has good power in his hand, really good pop. I think he's got better pop than he looks like he does. And on the ground, he's a beast. Taking guys down and ripping arms off. The Kimura's been his thing as of late. And even in fights where he doesn't finish with a Kimura, it's always there for him. It's his move. And he's a really good top game fighter like that. But still, he's a guy that has passed every test but the Khamzat Chimaev test. He's been in some close fights, some decisions, and he's shown to have good traits. Even if he doesn't look like the dominant beast like a Khamzat Chimaev would, he's still digging deep and making shit happen. Had this close fight with Chad Hanningcom, who lost to someone on the Contender Series recently and missed out on the UFC shot as of now. But that was a really close fight, and Ikram Aliskerov, even though he slowed down a little bit, he was still winning in the end, was able to wrangle Chad. And that was a close fight where his legs were getting chopped up early, and it was not easy. A lot of grueling fighting in the clinch and just a taxing fight. And he showed to have everything going on in the end where he can pull ahead. Also won a decision against Nishan Burrell at Eagle FC, the Khabib promotion. And the one guy to beat him is Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat knocked him dead with an uppercut. He was trying to take him down, and Ikram was defending, had some good whizzers, and looked like it was going to be a really good fight. And then Khamzat caught him with an uppercut, and it was no ordinary uppercut. I mean, to be fair, it was a brutal knockout. Can't say it counts more than just a strike against the chin of Ikram Aliskerov, but it's a strike against the chin. He was knocked dead. Mouthpiece went flying out, and he collapsed. On impact before even hitting the ground. The impact of the punch knocked him out. But that is the one loss, and he's looked healthy ever since and beforehand. And Robert Whittaker definitely has the power to do that, but he's not Mr. Knockout. So I think I'd be surprised if Whittaker just knocked him out, especially a one punch like that. I could see a round 3 TKO or something being more the thing for Whittaker here. But the one way Aliskerov has lost was just the lights getting shut out. And who knows what that fight would have looked like if the lights weren't shut out. So there's a lot of reason to have faith in Aliskerov and very little reason to have doubt in Aliskerov. As for Whittaker, there's more doubt creeping in, but he has built a legacy already and built one hell of a career on being this championship level fighter, and especially a championship level point fighter. Again, I said he beat every top contender aside from the few guys to beat him in the middleweight division, Izzy and Dricus du Plessis, and just about every win of those middle in that middleweight run was a decision for Robert Whittaker, taming these excellent fighters, whether it's 3 rounds or 5 rounds, whether it's Kelvin Gastelum or Jared Cannonier. Robert Whittaker is able to figure them out and get it done in the end. So I'm picking Robert Whittaker to figure out Ikram Aliskerov, slow him down, and find a way to take over this fight. But even with the minus 148 odds, better than 3-2, I cannot pull the trigger on the bet here. I think it's one where once he does win, I'll regret it because it'll seem so obvious. This top 5 legend, one of the best ever, blah, 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 versus a guy who's never been anywhere close to this spot. So it'll seem obvious afterwards, and that's probably how I'll talk about it when I rewrite history. But as of now, without having seen the fight, I'm too scared to bet on. But Robert Whittaker is the pick, and let's go with him winning a decision. I think a decision would be more likely than one of those 3rd, 4th round TKOs. And as for the other side, Ikram Aliskerov, I'd say if he's to beat Whittaker, it is by knockout. Whittaker's been knocked out, again, by Dricus, by Israel Adesanya, by Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He's been hurt lately. The spinning wheel kick, back kick, hook kick from Paulo Costa. I'd say a knockout is most likely for Ikram Aliskerov. And if you told me he knocked him out, I'd say it was probably with a flying knee. But that's my top pick for Aliskerov. And if he was to win otherwise, I'd say it'd be a decision. I don't think he's going to take down Whittaker and rip his arm off. Whittaker's a tough guy to get out of there submission-wise. And I think it would be a grueling fight if Aliskerov was to win a decision. But the pick is Robert Whittaker by decision, and the bet as of now is non-existent. The money line is set at 2.5 rounds. I would be inclined to say over, but, with the short notice and whatever and all that, it's not something I can pull the trigger on. So there's that. In the co-main event, we have Sergey Pavlovich taking on Alexander Volkov. My prediction for this fight is that it ends via TKO or knockout. And I'll actually look for that prop. It might be interesting. But my pick is Alexander Volkov wins. So right now, without any props available, I have bet on Volkov because he's a 2-1 underdog. But the bet I'm most confident in right now is under 1.5 rounds at minus 130. I typically don't love under 1.5 rounds because it's only 7.5 minutes and I get nervous. But with a Sergey Pavlovich fight, I feel much more confident in under 1.5 rounds. Sergey's been defeated only twice. Both are in the UFC and both are round 1 finishes. Alistair Overeem got him out of there on the ground, was able to get on top of him, took him down from the clinch, and just mauled him on top. Sergey looked lost, kind of like a turtle on his back. And that was his UFC debut, so he was a little overwhelmed there inside the fight and maybe outside the fight, and Overeem was too much for him. And in his last fight, he was knocked out by Tom Aspinall in the interim title fight, co-main event of a pay-per-view. And that was a major strike against his chin. It was a bad knockout. Tom Aspinall's a big, fast heavyweight, and that's what the difference was there, his speed. But he came in with some lightning fast hands and in one combination put Sergey Pavlovich down and out. But Pavlovich is only 32 years old still, which is like a baby for a heavyweight. So I'm not ready to write him off, but I am ready to pick against him based on that knockout loss. And that's what I'm doing here. Volkov, he's got to be able to stand up to the danger of Pavlovich because Pavlovich is going to be able to corral him and get off on him. Volkov, who is gigantic, he's got 4 inches of height on Pavlovich, but he's actually giving up 4 inches of reach because Sergey's got those extra long arms and he's got bricks in his hands. I mean, Sergey's power is in that Ngannou class, that Derek Lewis class, who he knocked out. But he is definitely in that elite class of power and danger. And with his reach advantage, he is going to be getting off on Volkov early. Volkov, though, he's only been knocked out twice by Derek Lewis in round 3 with seconds left. His balls were hot. And that's the fight where he said his balls were hot, right before Conor fought Khabib. And also, he was knocked out by Minikov, former Bellator champion, back in Bellator. He got taken down a little and controlled early on, and then at the end of round one, got hit with a big uppercut and was pounded out against the cage. So that it's happened to Volkov here and there, but he's got a lot of experience, and these TKOs are few and far between. The last one was 5, 6 years ago, coming up on 6 years ago, and he's been in there with so many great heavyweights and looked healthy. So I can't say like he should stand up to the power and the danger of Pavlovich, because as I expressed a minute ago, I think a lot of the danger and power of Pavlovich, but I think he's got a good chance of doing so, and I'm picking him to do so. And then to either come back and counter Pavlovich and go through the chin, or take over and start stabbing him to the body and turning it into a different type of fight. And on the ground, Volkov is the better grappler. He's got more skills, certainly, than Sergey Pavlovich, I think. I mean, what do I know? I haven't rolled with either guy. But I think Volkov's got the better game overall, but Sergey Pavlovich has power and physicality on his side. And Volkov isn't Fabricio Verdum on the mat, so well, even though he knocked out Verdum. But I think if Sergey was to get on top of Volkov, he'd be winning the fight with his danger, power, those bricks in his hands, and his size and strength. Yeah, Volkov couldn't make that work for him. But on top, Volkov could exploit a potential grappling advantage, maybe. He doesn't, even though he knocked out Overeem, Volkov, he doesn't have the physicality of Overeem, I think, to quite overwhelm Pavlovich like the way Overeem did. Overeem was an incredible grappler, too, even though he didn't always get the credit for it. But I do think that Volkov should win this fight slightly. I give him a slight edge. I think he may not have the danger and the power of Volkov, but of Pavlovich, but he's perhaps in better health and better condition. And I also think he's still got good danger and power to test Sergey Pavlovich's chin and also his overall striking game and especially his body. So Volkov is the pick. I'm going with a late round one TKO, especially because that helps justify my under 1.5 round bet. But the under 1.5 rounds is where it's at for me right now. I'll wait for the props because I do think, it's going one way or the other. Pavlovich, if he does win, it's by early knockout. And Volkov, if he does win, it's by knockout, I'll say. Probably early, but whatever. Could be otherwise. Pavlovich has gone the distance, by the way. He's been the distance 3 times, even went 5 rounds. And that was a fight where it wasn't the most taxing, exerting fight. It was kind of like an intense sparring match type of level of intensity. But he still looked good over the course of 5 rounds and didn't slow down. I mean, not noticeably anyway. Even ripped the guy to the mat in the final seconds, maybe just to make a statement. But yeah, there's no reason to doubt his cardio or anything, like there are with a lot of other guys where they have all these round one finishes. But I still think Pavlovich, well, being the fighter he's been for the last few years, a guy who destroys in round one, if he does get out of round one, even though there's no doubt in his cardio, I have more faith in Volkov, especially with his style. And if he's able to make it at kicking range, his fight, he's got the type of style to slow down Pavlovich more quickly than Pavlovich would Volkov. So if it goes longer, I'd favor Volkov, but I think it goes shorter regardless of who wins. And I'm still siding with Volkov. A lot of fucking words, very little meaning. In the featured bout on the card, or the third fight from the top, we have Kelvin Gastelum taking on Daniel Rodriguez, D-Rod. My prediction for the fight is Kelvin Gastelum wins a decision. And I haven't bet on Kelvin. In fact, I'm tempted to bet on the over, not only because I picked Kelvin to win by decision, but because I think it's a good hedge on D-Rod as well. Because if Daniel Rodriguez is going to win the fight, I'm very sure it's by decision. Or maybe submission somehow. But Kelvin, he's proven to be very tough to get out of there. He's been hurt He's been taking it from the best fighters in the world at middleweight and welterweight for the last few years, 10 years or whatever it's been in the UFC, and no one's been able to get him out of there, even though Adesanya came very close in one of the greatest wars ever. But Kelvin, he's coming back down to welterweight here. I should mention that, or he's been down at welterweight for a few fights or whatever. Sean Brady beat him in his last one with a round 3 sub. But I think Kelvin has still a lot to offer on the feet at welterweight, but he's definitely lost that speed advantage. When he arrived at the in the middleweight division, that speed advantage was on full display against Tim Kennedy and Jacare and Michael Bisping and whoever else. But here against D-Rod, not that D-Rod's the fastest fighter, but he is a natural welterweight, and Kelvin is you know, he's gained a little in physicality, hopefully, at expense of his speed, which in the welterweight division, it's not as fast. But I still think it's fast enough to win this fight. I think D-Rod could give him a close kickboxing battle, but I'd still favor Kelvin to get it done, especially with his boxing. He's got really sharp hands, and he moves better than D-Rod. And as for the health, Kelvin, like I said, on paper anyway, impossible to finish via strikes. And Daniel Rodriguez, he's only been knocked out once, but it was in his last fight against Ian Gary, who caught him with a long head kick and pounded him out. Ian's one of the best fighters in the world, on his way to becoming whatever he's going to become. He's about to level up, I'm sure. So there's no shame there, but it is still a 37-year-old fighter, his last loss, and it was a knockout. So I definitely say he's in worse condition, health-wise and chin-wise, than Kelvin Gastelum. Kelvin has been submitted a few times. I have to mention that. He was submitted by Sean Brady, also heel hooked by Jack Hermanson, and arm triangled by Chris Weidman. I was there for that fight. It was fucking amazing. UFC Long Island. But I don't think that's a path to victory for D-Rod, even though he guillotined, what's his face, Tim Means in his UFC debut. And he's definitely got a little more going on than meets the eye. But it shouldn't be enough to get Kelvin Gastelum out of there. Jack, Weidman, and Sean Brady are beast grapplers. And Daniel Rodriguez, even if he's got tricks up his sleeve, he's not in their class. But Kelvin Gastelum, he's a guy that has been in there with a lot of great fighters and been beaten up a lot. He's got his share of losses, 9 losses in his 27 wins or whatever it is. About 1/3 of his fights are losses. And that's because he's been fighting the best and even made it to the championship level at middleweight. Daniel Rodriguez, he's got a prettier record, 16-4, 17-4, whatever. But he doesn't have the resume of Kelvin Gastelum. So Gastelum has been beaten, but he's been beaten by excellent fighters. And the guys that have beaten him on the feet, they're more proven than D-Rod. The worst of which is probably like Darren Till. Still a great fighter in his day and a UFC main eventer. But D-Rod, if he does win this fight, I think it is because it's a kickboxing bout and he's able to thwart the boxing of Kelvin Gastelum and meet him with some nice counters and perhaps even hit harder. But I'm picking Kelvin. I'm picking his durability to keep him in the fight if he's got to stand up to more danger from D-Rod. And I'm picking his hands to carry him to a decision victory. So Kelvin by decision is the pick. And the bet as of now doesn't exist, although I'm tempted to bet on the over. Again, over 2.5 rounds, minus 260. That's damn near even with Kelvin Gastelum's money line. And I consider it Kelvin's primary path to victory, but also Daniel Rodriguez's only path to victory as well, the decision. So maybe there's a little value there, but I'll wait to the props and see if I play anything out at all. Next up, we have Johnny Walker versus Volkan Oezdemir. This is a fight that I would have been sure would have ended via finish 5 years ago or so. I would have been positive. But now, 5 years later, after having seen each guy win and lose via decision in slower, grueling paced fights, even 5 rounds somehow for Johnny Walker against Thiago Santos. But after having seen this, I wouldn't be surprised if this one went the distance somehow. Whereas again, 5 years ago, it seemed like an impossibility. But I am still picking this to end via finish. I think this is a fight where we're going to see the return of the glass cannon in Johnny Walker. Not that he's ever gone away, but these guys are both very dangerous, and Johnny Walker, especially, is very vulnerable. Been knocked out quite a few times, got knocked out in his last one, and overall, he's in worse health than just about every one of his opponents as far as the chin goes. Volkan Oezdemir, though, he's been knocked out twice, or TKO'd anyway. He was TKO'd on the ground against Daniel Cormier and knocked dead against Yuri Prohashka, which was his last knockout loss. So it has happened with him, and Johnny Walker is as dangerous as any light heavyweight on the planet. So if some Johnny Walker shit was to find his chin, yeah, he could be the next guy to knock out Volkan. Volkan has also been submitted as well. He was submitted in round three by Anthony Smith in a UFC main event right after I think he fought for the title. Uh, Volkan Oezdemir, that is. And he was also submitted back in Bellator against his fighter Kelly Annetson with a rear naked choke in round two, or a face crank. But that's been it. And Johnny Walker, even though he's got some tricks up his sleeve, like he submitted Iwan Kutalaba, I'd be surprised if he submitted Volkan Oezdemir. I'd be surprised if either guy got a submission win. And of course, Volkan Oezdemir got a submission win in his last fight against Bogdan Guskov, who has since gone on to make his name known. But I am picking Volkan to win this fight. Volkan Oezdemir. I think he's going to be able to crack the chin of Johnny Walker at some point. And even if they didn't, and this was a decision fight, I'd pick Volkan Oezdemir to out hustle Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker, if he can fight on the outside, just throwing kicks, trying to chop you down from the outside like he did to Anthony Smith, yeah, then maybe he could win a decision here. But I still think Volkan Oezdemir would be too aggressive to just sit back and let himself get pieced up at the end of Johnny Walker's long kicks. So I think this will devolve into a war. I think both guys will be trying to kill each other. And I think Volkan Oezdemir is in better shape and also has the requisite power to knock out Johnny Walker. Volkan Oezdemir came into the UFC and he was knocking everybody out. Jimmy Manawa, Misha Serkinov with that punch to the side of the head, and then whoever else. And eventually he fell off. Oh, he won a decision, a tight decision over in St. Preux. And then he reached the title shot after those wins. And since he hasn't been back, he's been in some big fights and, so-so record. But here I think he's fighting a guy in Johnny Walker that will bring out that old no time Volkan Oezdemir. The guy that knocks people out and then goes like this. I don't know if he's going to do no time exactly because he might have to knock Johnny Walker out in the first minute to start flaunting and taunting like that. But I do think even if this fight went late, Volkan Oezdemir would be the one getting the finish. So Volkan Oezdemir is the pick. I've got him winning by knockout. I've got him winning in round one, I guess. But even without Volkan Oezdemir winning, I would think he out hustles Johnny Walker, crowds him and pressures him, and ends up winning a decision in one way or another. And it could be with ground control as well. This is one where either guy can get on top of the other guy and win the round that way. Because they both have something to offer jiu-jitsu wise, but not at this level, and in my opinion, not against each other. So Volkan Oezdemir is the pick, and Volkan Oezdemir is the bet as of now at plus 100, even money. I think this is a fight that he should win, and they're at toss-up odds. So even if I pick Johnny Walker to win, I'd be betting on him. And I'm picking Volkan, so I bet on Volkan Oezdemir. I will wait for the props because I do think knockout is much more likely than decision, and certainly than submission. But it would have to be really enticing because as of now, I'm comfortable with the money line at plus 100. Like I said, there's always a chance this goes long and slow. So I have that in the back of my head. And if Johnny Walker is to win, I'd say finish is much more likely for him as well. He's just such a dangerous guy. He's proven he could win a decision, yeah, but I don't think he's going to get a slow-paced fight with Volkan Oezdemir. I think Volkan is going to be pressuring him and bringing the fight out of him. And I guess if Johnny was to win, I'd go with a flying knee over a decision. So I'll wait for those props as well. Up next, we have Shara Magomedov, or Shara Bullet, taking on Joilton Luderbach. I think this is going to be a close fight. I slightly favor Shara Bullet to win because I think he's got a little more going on physically and on the feet. But Joilton Luderbach is an excellent, well-versed fighter, grappler first, but has turned into an excellent striker, and he's got a lot of experience. 3 times the experience, more than that, 4 times the experience of Shara Bullet. So Joilton Luderbach is a serious test. The reason I'm picking against him is because he's the smaller man. He's a guy that is giving up 2 inches of height, and I don't know the reach, but I do know that Joilton Luderbach was fighting in the PFL at 155 just 3 years ago. And now here he is 3 years later fighting at 185. He has fluctuated in weight class, I should say, 155, 170, and now here 180. And he's also fluctuated in rule sets, fighting kickboxing and karate combat and whatever else. Mixed in a lot of different striking matches in the last 5 years or so. And that's excellent for him because, again, he started off with a grappling base. But here he's fighting a guy in Shara Bullet who has better agility. He's the better athlete. I'm assuming he's going to move better in the kickboxing fight. And he's also better at kicking range, which could be the story of the fight. But on the flip side, Joilton's good at catching kicks and ripping people to the mat, where if the kicks are the story of the fight, it could go the other way, where Joilton is catching those kicks and taking them down in the same way that Bruno Silva did, making that a surprisingly close fight against Shara Bullet. Shara definitely won, but he didn't meet the expectations, I think, of a lot of fight fans who were waiting for his debut. But Joilton is up against it physically. He's tough as all fuck and the more versatile fighter and the much more seasoned fighter. But the fight is going to start on the feet, and Joilton is going to be, as seasoned as he is, he's going to be a half step behind with Shara Bullet on the feet. Shara Bullet is an excellent dynamic kicker, really a striker altogether. He's got excellent hands. But the kicks, I think, are the primary difference here between the two of them. And that's where he would have more success against Luderbach. Luderbach, he's got those takedowns. Ripped the last 3 guys to beat him: Clay Collard, Raush Manfio, and Dricus du Plessis. He was able to get on top of all of them. And I don't even know at what weight the Dricus du Plessis fight took place, but it definitely wasn't lightweight, whatever it was. But that was a fight where Dricus, his size and strength and his skill, overwhelmed Joilton in the end. Joilton looked really good early on, had a good round 1, took down Dricus and was controlling him. And then in round 2, Dricus took over, really with a guillotine, I believe. At the end of round 1, he kind of took over. But then in round 2, he got on top of Joilton, and it was too much. Joilton couldn't get up, and he got pounded out. The fights against Raush Manfio and Clay Collard, he lost split decisions, and they were both close fights, but you could certainly make the case that he won both those fights, especially the Clay Collard fight, in my opinion. But despite those being lightweights, they're 2 excellent lightweights, 2 of the best lightweights in the PFL. I think Raush Manfio might not be in the PFL anymore. But anyway, those are the last 2 losses he's had in 5 years or so. And he looked very competitive. So the only real clear loss he's had in the past 7 years or whatever in MMA is to Dricus du Plessis, the best middleweight on the planet. So Joilton Luderbach definitely has the potential to surprise Shara Magomedov, Shara Bullet. But I think if you put a gun to my head, I would pick Shara Bullet to win. Shara Bullet, it's not like he hasn't been tested either. Not nearly as much as Luderbach, but he's been to a decision twice. Actually, his 2 decisions are in his last 3 fights against this guy Ragozin and against Bruno Silva. And he showed no cardio issues there. And he's even gotten some round 3 finishes, some dynamic finishes, and he's always looked good. So there's no real reason to doubt Shara Bullet, and I guess that's my reason for picking him to win. But I have a lot of faith in Joilton Luderbach, where if I'm going to play anything, maybe I'll throw a sprinkle on Luderbach. And even though he's a very versatile fighter, my prediction for him winning would be a decision. So I'll wait for the props and see what to play. But I definitely think there's some potential for an upset here with Joilton Luderbach, despite all the shitty circumstances. And he did take this fight on a few weeks' notice, but he's such a seasoned fighter. And it's been, I think, over a month's notice. So I'm expecting him to come in good shape. Maybe not peak middleweight shape. He's not maybe the best natural middleweight. He's not a natural middleweight. But I still think he'll be in good shape here. And what he has to do is crowd Magomedov and take away the kicks. Take away the kicks, whether that's with crowding him with striking or timing the kicks with takedowns. But Joilton Luderbach has to mix things up here with Magomedov and not let himself get caught at the end of a kicking battle, because that's one that he'll lose against a much more agile fighter. So I think this one could be close. Joilton's definitely the more well-versed fighter. He's got better skills on the ground and on the feet. He's got a lot to offer. Really turned himself into an excellent striker. But the pick with a gun to my head is the athleticism and agility combined with the dynamic kicking game and the kickboxing game of Magomedov is enough to win him a decision. And that is the pick. So I'll wait for the props, but yeah, that's where it's at. And of course, I wanted to mention that it was just announced that Felipe Lima, Octagon champion, the promotion, is making his debut here on this card against Muhammadjan Naimov. I will preview that fight, and I will make a separate video for it. I like to watch the fucking fights, so I can't just commit to making a video, and I was already in the middle of making this one. So I figured I'd just get this one out there. But that should be on the main card. And just so you know, I was picking Muhammadjan Naimov to defeat Melsik Bagdasaryan. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.